Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Newark and Sherwood series, a district of 84 civil parishes right in the centre of Nottinghamshire. Come with me as we delve into one of them. Okay, today in Newark and Sherwood I've got one that's been hotly anticipated by a few people, it has to be said. This one's been requested a few times. Now, I'm not sure how much of this I'm going to be able to film. I'll be able to film the main village, I'll be able to film its very nice, lovely church, but as for anything else, I really don't know, to be honest with you, because some of this may well be off limits. Welcome to Ossington. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Ossington is a tiny village and civil parish which lies 7 miles north of Newark. For census purposes, its population count is included with that of Ompton and Laxton and Morehouse. An estate village, this one can be traced back to Saxon times when it was known as Ossington and then later in 1144 as Ossington. The lord at that time was Roger de Burren. It was once much larger than this, but it's by no means a deserted village. Rather, it was centred on Ossington Hall, the ancestral home of the Dennison family, most notably John Evelyn Dennison. He's probably better known as the first Viscount Ossington, and he was a British statesman. He served as Speaker of the House of Commons from 1857 to 1872. We'll touch more on the estate as a whole throughout this episode, but our walk first must pass the village hall on Main Street, which I initially thought might have been an old army hut. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if it had been used as one in times past. It's a plain, corrugated iron tin tabernacle style building, and outside we find the parish notice board. Now, in much the same way as other small villages like this, Ossington has no shops, nor does it have a post office, but it's becoming something of a tradition now to find these post boxes. We're heading up Morehouse Lane shortly. Here, on the junction between it and Main Street, there's an important landmark, the village's war memorial, or more accurately, a shrine. The shrine was built by Messrs Smith & Son, builders, undertakers and stonemasons of Millgate, Newark, and was constructed of Clipsham ashlar limestone. It was Grade 2 listed in 1985. The shrine has the names of the 10 men from the village who died in the Great War on the side facing the road, and the 21 who served and returned on the faces either side. So we're heading for the site of the former Ossington Hall, and no, it's not this house. To do that, there's a footpath which runs into the woods opposite this. This will lead us towards Ossington's main religious building. This wasn't as straightforward as I make it sound though. Be warned if you attempt this path yourself. Okay, now my route goes through this wood on a public footpath, but finding the actual public footpath is proving to be a little bit difficult. I found the start of it, but it's led me to this little coppice, which it seems to have stopped here. Now, whether or not it runs down there, I don't know, but eventually it will take me to the church, which is kind of over that way. But yeah, this is a very overgrown path if I'm still on it. If I've accidentally strayed from it. I've sort of got myself lost in the woods here. I will find it. It will take me to the church. Now, the bit that I thought was going to be off limits later is when I come back from the church, because there's a path or some kind of track which leads from the church back down to the main road. I'm not sure if that's private. We'll find out when we get to the church. I may have to come back through here if it is. After a bit of a struggle trying to find the path, I abandoned the woods and figured I was in the wrong place. And I was. The path begins here, just to the north of the woods I was in. The footpath runs over the adjoining field and then around the next one. Its way markers are not the best in the world, and it's so easy to get lost here. We pass over a beck at this point. This is the same stretch of water that becomes Morehouse Beck. It may not look like much here, but just downstream it flows into a sizable lake. Ossington Hall used to overlook that lake. Now we're in the churchyard, and the structure in front of you now isn't a monument or a gravestone. This is in fact a weather vane. And just yards away we have the site of the former Ossington Hall. Note the trees. In old pictures of the hall, those trees can be seen, but they're only young. The hall may have gone, but the trees still stand. One thing that does remain from the days of the hall is this wall. If you look over this wall here, you can see the lake I mentioned on the way up here. The wall is notable for another reason. Right, so over this wall, you'll see there's a dip. Now this kind of feature has got a name. It's called, and don't laugh, a ha-ha. Let's explain what a ha-ha is. A ha-ha is a type of sunken fence that was commonly used in landscape gardens and parks in the 18th century. It involved digging a deep, dry ditch, the inner side of which would be built up to the level of the surrounding turf with either a dry stone or a brick wall. Meanwhile, the outer side was designed to slope steeply upwards before levelling out again into turf. The point of the ha-ha was to give the viewer of the garden the illusion of an unbroken, continuous rolling lawn, whilst providing boundaries for grazing livestock. Originally a feature of formal French gardens, the ha-ha was first described in print in 1709 by gardening enthusiast Desalles d'Argenville. It derived its name from the success of the optical illusion it created from a distance on viewers of the garden. The concealed ditch and wall would surprise the eye coming near it and make one cry, "Ah, ah." Ossington Hall was built in 1729. In 1753 it came into the possession of William Dennison, who was a merchant of Leeds and High Sheriff of Nottinghamshire for 1779. It then passed through the Dennison family. After World War II it fell into disrepair and it was eventually demolished in the 1960s. An urn from the estate survives at Flintham Hall. This gravestone is interesting, by the way. This is next to the weather vane. It's one of the female members of the Dennison family, but I couldn't tell you which one it is. All that remains of the hall are a few outbuildings and a private chapel that now serves the parish as Holy Rood Church. This is a Grade 1 listed building dating originally from the 12th century. It was rebuilt in 1782 and 1783 by the architect John Carr, with some minor alterations and additions coming later in the 19th century. It also has a barrel organ built by Thomas Robson in 1840. There are monuments in the church to the Cartwright family, who were at one time owners of the estate. Well, I've got to say I'm thankful for the locals and their knowledge of places like this, because coming up that footpath I was just basically aiming for the church. I knew the hall was here somewhere. I would have had to find everything myself though if it hadn't been for a chance meeting with a local who was walking his dogs at the same time, which is a brilliant thing, because I wouldn't have known where to go to find the hall, to find the ha-ha. I knew it existed, it was just a case of where was it. And yeah, that was really helpful, really helpful. Thank you very much for that. Now it's time to go back down to the main road, and the local also told me that yes, you are allowed to walk down that track I was talking about. So yeah, back to the road and back to the village. So this is the track I was talking about earlier, which I wasn't sure if I could use to get back to the village. I'll show you why I thought I may not be able to use this when we reach the bottom. The track is in fact a former drive, which was the main entrance to the hall. Ever since the hall has been demolished, this has only served as an access point to Holy Rood Church. Eventually we come to two Victorian iron gates with urn-top stone piers. These are magnificent and quite rightly Grade 2 listed. The associated walls and railings still stand as well at the bottom of the drive. Whilst the hall may now not exist, these are a pretty good reminder of it. So it's this sign here, which is why I thought I might not be able to walk up this track, because as you can see, it says private to the church. I assume then, if you are allowed to walk up here, as the local man told me, that the track is accessible to the church, but you can't get anywhere else. That's probably what that means. It's I'd seen this on Street View and I thought to myself, that's kind of contradicting itself. So I'm not quite sure if I can walk up that track or not. But the more I think about it, the struggle I had with that footpath earlier, this is the most logical way, because I mean, people who come to the church aren't going to want to walk over that footpath, are they? They're going to want to walk on an actual tarmacked road. It makes a bit more sense. Okay, right, now I'm going this way, and I'll turn right at the bottom there. There's a junction there, and that will take us back to virtually where we began, and that, my friends, will be Ossington. Let's go and see what else we can find to finish this one off. All we need to do now is walk back to the start. As we do, I've got some more interesting bits of information that link the village to places around the world. Let's start with a street in London. Named Ossington Street, it's one that London taxi drivers know very well as it links Westbourne Grove to Notting Hill Gate. It's believed to have been named after Viscount Ossington. Ossington Avenue in Toronto was named after the village as well. That's because the Dennisons were early landowners around the street's southern terminus. Toronto also has a TTC station named Ossington. The TTC is the city's subway system. It's mad to think that the largest city in Canada has links to a small village in rural Nottinghamshire. On the subject of transport, if you're a little closer to home than Canada and you fancy coming to see Ossington Hall, you're going to need the number 333 bus to get here. Our walk finishes where Main Street meets Lambert's Lane. Up here is Ossie, a family-owned equine feed company founded in 1985, and it's still run from Highland Farm. Okay, to finish with, I need to turn the car around and drive that way out of the village because we need to cross RAF Ossington's airfield. You can tell it's an airfield as well. I drove into Ossington this morning from that way, and the road that we use is one of the old runways. It's really bumpy. You can certainly tell it used to be an old airfield. So let's drive across that to finish this one off. I've been Andy, otherwise known as the Village Idiot, and this has been the Parish of Ossington in Newark and Sherwood, and I'm out. So to finish, we're driving on one of the old runways at RAF Ossington, just to the west of the village. Construction of the airfield began in 1941 with the aim of completion by 1942. It was constructed as a standard A-shaped bomber airfield with 3 hard runways, the longest of the 3 being just over 1.5 kilometres long. After completion, the airfield was put under No. 5 Group RAF Bomber Command. In January 1942, the airfield became an RAF Flying Training Command Station, flying Airspeed Oxfords. No. 93 Group Bomber Command would assume control sometime after that, and Ossington became a satellite station for RAF Gamston. RAF Ossington has had its fair share of crew and aircraft losses. These include a Spitfire pilot, Flying Officer John Smith, who was aged just 21. He was killed when his aircraft crashed at Lee Road in Gainsborough. Like many stations, RAF Ossington was transferred to RAF Transport Command, where pilots were trained to fly Avro Lancasters and Avro Lancastrians on the London to New Zealand route. Eventually, the runways were broken up for the construction of the A1, although some taxiways and buildings have survived, like the ones seen today in the picture bit.